Elena closed her eyes and began breathing in a pattern that seemed both ancient and purposeful. The change in her was immediate and unsettling. Her posture shifted, becoming more alert yet somehow more relaxed. When she opened her eyes again, they held a quality of awareness that seemed to see beyond the physical world around them. "The zone is active now," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. "I can see the layers of this place. The building isn't just a building, it's a focal point where different realities touch. The voices you're hearing are real, but they're coming from people who are caught between normal space and whatever exists beyond it." Mark watched in fascination and growing unease as Elena approached the mysterious building. She moved with the confidence of someone navigating familiar territory, even though she had never been here before. Her hands traced patterns in the air that seemed to follow invisible lines of force. "Dr. Chen, what are your instruments showing now?" Mark asked quietly. Sarah checked her readings and gasped. "The electromagnetic patterns are stabilizing into something that almost looks like a grid. It's as if Elena's presence is organizing the chaos we detected earlier." Elena reached the door of the building and paused. "The threshold here is critical," she called back to them. "This doorway leads to a space that exists partially outside normal reality. The missing hikers went through, but they couldn't find their way back because the exit doesn't follow the same rules as the entrance." She placed her hand on the doorframe and her entire body seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. For a moment, Mark could swear he saw two versions of Elena, one standing at the door and another already inside the building. "Captain Thompson," Elena's voice came from both versions simultaneously, "I need you and your team to create an anchor point. Hold hands and form a chain. Keep me connected to your reality while I navigate theirs." Mark had no scientific explanation for what was happening, but the desperate voices of the missing hikers drove him to follow Elena's instructions. He gripped Ranger Davis's hand, who connected to Williams, who linked to Dr. Chen. The human chain extended toward Elena as she stepped across the threshold. The moment Elena disappeared into the building, reality around them began to shift. The forest that had seemed normal moments before revealed its true nature. Trees appeared to be growing in impossible directions, some with their roots reaching toward the sky. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as if it might reshape itself without warning. Through their human chain, Mark could feel Elena moving through spaces that defied description. She was climbing stairs that led downward, walking through rooms that were larger inside than the building could contain, following corridors that twisted back on themselves in ways that hurt to think about. "I can see them," Elena's voice reached them from impossible distances. "All 10 missing hikers are here, but they're spread across different layers of this space. Some have been here for days, others have been here for what feels like weeks, but time moves differently in each layer." Dr. Chen was still monitoring her equipment with one hand while maintaining the chain with the other. "The readings are incredible," she whispered. "It's like we're connected to multiple dimensional spaces simultaneously." Elena's voice came again, strained with effort. "The hikers are alive, but they're trapped in what I call echo loops. They're reliving the same moments over and over, trying to find the exit but always ending up back where they started. I need to break those loops and guide them toward the true exit." Mark could feel Elena's struggle through their connection. She was fighting against forces that wanted to keep the hikers trapped, battling with powers that viewed human consciousness as something to collect and preserve rather than something that belonged in the normal world. "There's something else here," Elena's voice carried notes of alarm. "This place isn't natural. Someone or something created this anomalous zone deliberately. It's designed to capture people, to study them. The building we saw is just the visible part of a much larger structure that exists mostly outside normal space." Through the connection, Mark began to see glimpses of what Elena was experiencing. Vast chambers filled with collected moments of human experience, preserved like specimens in an otherworldly laboratory. The missing hikers weren't just lost, they were being kept as subjects for observation by an intelligence that didn't understand the difference between studying humans and destroying them. "Elena, can you get them out?" Mark called. "I'm trying, but the entity that created this place doesn't want to let them go. It's learning from their fear, their confusion, their desperate attempts to escape. To it, they're valuable research subjects." The human chain began to feel the strain. Dr. Chen's equipment was registering energy surges that threatened to overwhelm her instruments. Ranger Williams was sweating despite the cool mountain air, and Davis was struggling to maintain his grip as strange sensations flowed through their connection. Captain, Elena's voice was growing weaker. I'm going to have to enter deeper into the zone to reach all the hikers. When I do, the connection between realities is going to become unstable. You might see things that challenge everything you believe about the nature of reality. Before Mark could respond, the world around them exploded into chaos. The forest began cycling through different seasons rapidly, snow falling and melting within seconds, leaves budding and falling in impossible acceleration. The mysterious building flickered between different architectural styles, sometimes appearing as a modern ranger station, sometimes as an ancient stone structure, sometimes as something that seemed to be made of pure energy. Through it all, Elena fought her way deeper into the anomalous space, gathering the trapped hikers one by one. Mark could feel her finding David Patterson, lost in a loop where he was eternally climbing the same hill, searching for a cell phone signal that would never come. She found the Johnson family, trapped in a recreation of their last campsite, setting up their tent over while something watched from the shadows. I have them, Elena announced, her voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. But getting out is going to require all of us to work together. The entity that controls this place is fighting back. It doesn't want to lose its subjects. The ground beneath the rangers began to buckle and shift. Trees that had stood for decades suddenly aged centuries in moments, crumbling into dust while new growth exploded from the earth. The mysterious road they had followed into this place was disappearing, erasing itself from existence to prevent their escape. Elena, what do we do? Mark shouted over the chaos. Hold the chain and run toward the strongest electromagnetic reading Dr. Chen can find. The entity's power has limits, and we need to find the edge of its influence before it realizes what we're doing. Dr. Chen, struggling to read her instruments while reality shifted around them, pointed toward a cluster of pine trees that seemed more solid than the others. That way. The readings are showing normal values in that direction. The team began running, still holding hands, dragging their connection to Elena behind them like a lifeline. As they moved, they could see the missing hikers materializing around Elena, confused and disoriented but, finally, free from their loops of captivity. The entity that controlled the anomalous zone made one final attempt to keep its subjects. The forest around them became a maze of impossible geometry, paths leading in circles, clearings that connected to themselves, distances that stretched and compressed without warning. But Elena, still deep in her zone state, navigated the chaos with supernatural skill, guiding both the rangers and the rescued hikers toward the boundary where normal reality resumed. They broke through the edge of the anomalous zone like swimmers surfacing from deep water. Suddenly, they were standing on familiar forest floor, breathing normal air, surrounded by the regular sounds of mountain wildlife. Behind them, the mysterious road faded from view, and the strange building vanished as if it had never existed. Elena collapsed to her knees, her connection to the zone severed. The 10 missing hikers stood around them, alive but deeply shaken by their experience. David Patterson was crying with relief, the Johnson family held each other tightly, and the other hikers looked around in amazement at the normal forest surrounding them. Is it over? Mark asked Elena, helping her to her feet. Elena nodded, though she looked exhausted by her ordeal. For now. But places like this don't just disappear. The anomalous zone is still there, just hidden again. The entity that created it will be more careful now, more selective about who it tries to capture. Dr. Chen was taking readings with equipment that now registered completely normal values. I'm not detecting any electromagnetic anomalies. Whatever was here, it's either gone or completely dormant. As they helped the rescued hikers back toward the main trails, Mark realized that his understanding of the forests he protected had changed forever. There were layers to these mountains that no map could show, dangers that no training manual could prepare him for, and mysteries that science couldn't yet explain. Elena, he said as they walked, how many places like this are there? More than most people realize, she replied. But fewer than there used to be. The modern world doesn't leave much room for anomalous zones. They're being pushed into more and more remote areas. Mark looked back one final time at the section of forest where they had encountered the impossible. It looked completely normal now, just trees and undergrowth and mountain air. But he knew that appearance was deceptive, and that his job as a protector of these lands had just become far more complicated. The missing hikers would return to their families with stories that few would believe. The rangers would file reports that would be classified and forgotten. And Elena Rodriguez would disappear back into whatever life she led when she wasn't rescuing people from places that shouldn't exist. But Mark Thompson would never forget the day when all his options had run out, and a stranger had entered the zone to save lives that conventional methods could never have reached. The mountains still held their secrets, but now he knew that sometimes, when the normal rules failed, there were other rules that could be learned, other ways of seeing that could save lives in the spaces between realities. The mystery road cut through the forest like a scar that shouldn't exist. Mark stood next to the Johnson family's abandoned SUV, studying the gravel path that stretched deeper into the woods. According to every map, survey, and satellite image in the Park Service database, this area was supposed to be dense, impassable forest. Yet here was a clear road, worn smooth by what appeared to be years of use. "This makes no sense," muttered Ranger Davis, comparing his GPS unit to the paper map. "According to these coordinates, we should be standing in the middle of a grove of old-growth pine trees." Elena Rodriguez had insisted on accompanying the team to this location, and now Mark was beginning to understand why. She walked along the road's edge with the confidence of someone who had seen similar impossibilities before. She knelt down and examined the tire tracks pressed into the soft earth. "These tracks aren't just from the Johnson family's vehicle," she said, pointing to the overlapping patterns. "Multiple cars have used this road recently. Some of these tracks look days old, others look fresh." Dr. Sarah Chen was taking readings with her electronic equipment, her face growing more puzzled by the minute. "The electromagnetic readings here are completely abnormal," she reported. "I'm getting interference patterns that shouldn't exist in nature. It's almost like the area is generating its own electromagnetic field." Mark felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. In his 15 years of ranger work, he had encountered lost hikers, injured climbers, dangerous wildlife, and severe weather conditions. But this felt different. This felt like the forest itself was hiding something. "Elena, you said you'd seen places like this before," Mark said. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" Elena stood up from examining the tire tracks, her expression grave. "Captain, have you ever heard of spatial anomalies? Areas where the normal rules of geography seem to break down? You mean like some kind of scientific phenomenon?" Dr. Chen asked, her scientific training clearly struggling with what she was witnessing. "Science doesn't have good explanations for places like this," Elena replied. "But indigenous peoples around the world have stories about areas where the land itself becomes unstable. Places where people can walk in but struggle to walk out. Where the geography shifts and changes in ways that modern mapping can't account for." Ranger Williams, who had been silent during the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "My grandfather was Yakama. He used to tell stories about places in these mountains that the tribe avoided. Said there were areas where the spirits were too strong, where people could get lost between worlds." Elena nodded. "Many cultures have similar stories. The important thing is that these aren't just legends. There are documented cases of people disappearing in areas with similar characteristics. Places where search teams find evidence that seems to violate normal physics." "But how does a road just appear?" Mark asked, gesturing at the path that stretched ahead of them. "Roads don't just materialize out of nowhere." "Maybe they don't appear," Elena said thoughtfully. "Maybe they were always here, but usually hidden. Maybe something is causing this area to become more accessible than it normally is." Dr. Chen was still taking readings, moving her equipment along the road's edge. "Whatever is happening here, it's getting stronger. The electromagnetic disturbances are increasing as we move toward the road center." Mark made a decision that went against every protocol in his training manual. "We're going to follow this road. But nobody goes alone, and we maintain radio contact at all times. If anything feels wrong, we retreat immediately." The team began walking down the mysterious road. The forest on either side looked normal enough, tall pines and scattered undergrowth typical of the Cascade Mountains. But the silence was unnatural. No bird songs, no insect buzzes, no sound of small animals moving through the brush. Their footsteps seemed muffled, as if the air itself was absorbing sound. After 20 minutes of walking, they reached a clearing that definitely didn't appear on any map. In the center stood what looked like an old ranger station, but its architectural style was wrong for the region. The building had a European look, with stone foundations and timber construction that belonged in the Alps rather than the American Northwest. "This building isn't in any of our historical records," Mark said, consulting his radio to report back to base. But the radio produced only static. Elena approached the building with visible tension in her shoulders. Buildings like this sometimes mark the center of an anomalous zone. The fact that you've never seen it before doesn't mean it hasn't been here for a very long time. Dr. Chen's equipment was now registering readings that made her shake her head in disbelief. The electromagnetic activity here is off the charts. And I'm detecting sound frequencies that are below the range of human hearing, but they're incredibly powerful. The door to the building stood slightly open. Through the gap, they could see what appeared to be a normal interior, furnished as if someone had been living there recently. But something about the quality of light inside seemed wrong, as if it came from a different time of day than the afternoon sun filtering through the forest canopy. "Captain," Elena said quietly, "I think your missing hikers found this place. And I think they went inside." Before Mark could respond, they heard voices. Human voices, calling out from somewhere beyond the building. The team looked at each other in amazement. After weeks of searching, they might finally be close to finding the missing people. "Help! Is someone out there?" The voice was clearly that of a young man, possibly David Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's son who had disappeared 5 days earlier. Mark felt a surge of hope mixed with caution. "David? This is Captain Thompson with the Park Service. Where are you?" "We're here. We're all here. But we can't find the way out." The voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once, creating an echo effect that made it impossible to pinpoint the location. Elena grabbed Mark's arm. "Captain, be very careful. Sound behaves strangely in places like this. The voices might not be coming from where they seem to be coming from." Dr. Chen was studying her instruments with growing alarm. "The audio frequencies I'm detecting are creating some kind of interference pattern. It's possible that voices are being distorted or reflected in ways that defy normal acoustics." "We have to try to reach them," Mark said. "These people have been missing for weeks. We can't just stand here and debate the physics of the situation." But Elena's grip on his arm tightened. "Captain, in my experience with places like this, the first rule is that things are never what they seem. The building, the voices, even this road we followed here, they might all be part of something designed to draw more people into this area." Ranger Williams had been walking around the perimeter of the clearing, and now he returned with a disturbed expression. "Captain, you need to see this. There are more tire tracks leading away from this clearing, heading deeper into the forest. But they lead to areas where the trees are too close together for any vehicle to pass." The voices continued calling for help, growing more urgent and desperate. Mark felt torn between his training to rescue people in distress and his growing understanding that this situation was beyond anything he had encountered before. "Elena, you said you had experience with places like this. How do we get those people out?" Elena looked at the building, then at the forest around them, and, finally, at the team of rangers who were depending on her expertise. "Captain, getting into an anomalous zone is usually easy. Getting out requires understanding the rules that govern that particular space. And those rules are often very different from the ones we're used to." She took a deep breath. "If we're going to rescue your missing hikers, I'm going to have to enter what locals in other regions call the zone. It's a state of awareness that allows someone to navigate these unusual spaces safely. But it's dangerous, and once I go in, I might not be the same person who comes out." The voices calling for help grew louder and more desperate. Time was running out for the missing hikers, and Mark realized that his conventional approach to search and rescue was useless here. Elena Rodriguez might be his only hope for bringing these people home safely. "What do you need from us?" Mark asked. Elena smiled grimly. "I need you to trust me, even when what I do doesn't make sense. And I need you to be ready to run if I tell you to. Because once I enter the zone, things are going to get very strange very quickly." The morning sun cast long shadows across the dense forest floor as Ranger Captain Mark Thompson studied the map spread across the hood of his Jeep. Red circles marked the locations where hikers had vanished over the past 3 weeks. 7 people had entered this section of the Cascade Mountains and never returned. The search teams had covered every marked trail, every known camping spot, and every water source within a 20-mile radius. Still, nothing. "Sir, we've got another problem," said Ranger Davis, approaching with his radio crackling with static. "The Johnson family never checked in at the visitor center yesterday. They were supposed to return from their 3-day backpacking trip." Mark's jaw tightened. The missing persons count had just jumped to 10. The pressure from the media, the families, and the Park Service headquarters was mounting daily. Local news crews had set up camp at the park entrance, broadcasting live updates about the mysterious disappearances. Social media was buzzing with theories ranging from wild animal attacks to something far more sinister. The forest that had once been Mark's sanctuary was becoming his nightmare. He had spent 15 years protecting these mountains, guiding lost tourists back to safety, and maintaining the delicate balance between human recreation and wildlife preservation. But this situation was different. This felt impossible. Dr. Sarah Chen, the park's wildlife biologist, joined them at the jeep. Her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of frustration. "I've analyzed the animal activity patterns in all the disappearance zones," she said, pulling out her tablet. "There's no evidence of bear attacks, mountain lion activity, or any predator behavior that could explain this. The wildlife actually seems to be avoiding those areas entirely." "What do you mean avoiding?" Mark asked, leaning closer to examine her data. "Look at these GPS collar readings from the local elk herd," Sarah pointed to the screen. "They've completely changed their migration pattern. Instead of following their usual route through Miller's Gap, they're making a wide detour. Same with the black bear population. It's like they sense something we can't." Ranger Williams, a 20-year veteran of the force, shook his head. "In all my years out here, I've never seen anything like this. These people aren't amateur hikers either. The Thompson couple who disappeared last week? They've been climbing these mountains for over a decade. They know every trail marker by heart." The radio on Mark's belt crackled to life. "Base to Captain Thompson. We have a situation at the north entrance. Family members of the missing hikers are demanding to speak with you immediately." Mark looked at his team. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy pack. These families trusted him to bring their loved ones home safely. The Park Service trusted him to maintain order and find solutions. But, for the first time in his career, he felt completely lost. "I'll handle the families," he said, climbing into the jeep. "Davis, I want you to coordinate with the search and rescue teams for another sweep of sectors 7 through 12. Williams, contact the state police and see if they can spare a helicopter for aerial reconnaissance. Sarah, keep monitoring those animal patterns. If the wildlife is avoiding something, we need to figure out what." As Mark drove toward the park entrance, he thought about the conversation he'd had with his wife the night before. She had suggested bringing in outside help, maybe consulting with experts who specialized in unusual missing person cases. Mark had initially resisted the idea, believing that his team could handle anything these mountains could throw at them. But, now, with 10 people missing and no leads, pride was becoming a luxury he couldn't afford. The families gathered near the visitor center were a heartbreaking sight. Parents clutched photos of their children, spouses held hands tightly, and worried faces turned toward Mark as he approached. Mrs. Patterson, whose son had disappeared 5 days earlier, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Captain Thompson, please tell me you have some news about David. He's only 22. This was supposed to be a simple day hike before he started his new job." Mark removed his ranger hat, a gesture of respect and humility. "Mrs. Patterson, I want you to know that we have every available resource focused on finding your son and the others. We're expanding our search area and bringing in additional equipment." "But, you still have no idea what happened to them?" asked Mr. Johnson, whose entire family had vanished. "How do 9 people just disappear without a trace? There has to be something you're not telling us." The accusation stung because Mark knew the man was grasping for answers that didn't exist. "Sir, I understand your frustration. If there was any information that could help locate your family, I would share it immediately. We're dealing with an unprecedented situation here." A woman in her 50s pushed through the crowd. She wore hiking boots and carried a large backpack, clearly prepared for outdoor adventure. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her weathered hands suggested someone familiar with outdoor work. "Captain Thompson, my name is Elena Rodriguez. I heard about the disappearances on the news," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that Mark couldn't place. "I think I might be able to help." Mark studied her face. There was something in her eyes that suggested she'd seen things that couldn't be easily explained. "Are you with search and rescue? Law enforcement?" Elena shook her head. "I'm what you might call a specialist in unusual situations. I've helped locate missing persons in cases where traditional search methods have failed." "I know this might sound strange, but I have experience with areas where people seem to simply vanish. What kind of experience? Mark asked, his curiosity overriding his skepticism. I've worked in forests like these before. Places where the normal rules don't seem to apply. Where experienced hikers disappear without leaving any trace. Where the wildlife starts acting strangely. Elena glanced at the worried families around them. Places where something old and powerful creates what locals often call forbidden zones. The families began murmuring among themselves. Some looked hopeful, others seemed skeptical of this stranger offering mysterious help. Mark felt torn between professional caution and desperate need for any new perspective. I appreciate your offer, Mark said carefully, but we're following established search and rescue protocols. We have trained professionals working around the clock. Elena nodded understandingly. I'm not suggesting you abandon your methods, Captain. But, when those methods aren't working, sometimes you need someone who thinks differently. Someone who can see patterns that others miss. Before Mark could respond, his radio erupted with urgent chatter. Captain Thompson, this is Williams. We found something at the Miller's Gap trailhead. You need to get here now. Mark's heart raced as he grabbed his radio. What did you find? It's the Johnson family's car, sir. But, it's not where they said they parked it. It's 3 miles deeper into the forest, on a road that doesn't exist on any of our maps. The crowd of families pressed closer, trying to hear the radio conversation. Elena stepped forward, her expression growing serious. Captain, that road you just heard about? I think I know where it leads.